Hi, welcome to Mimetic Theory 101. This is our fourth class, and today we're going to be going over great literature. And we're on location today on the campus of Northwestern University at the Shakespeare Garden to discuss great literature. But before we do that, I want to briefly go over the principles of mimetic theory. In our first class, we went over the principle that desire is mimetic. That is, we influence one another to desire certain objects, and these objects can be a new car, a new house, television. But it can also be a desire for power, prestige, popularity. In our second class, we discussed the scapegoat mechanism, that these shared desires, these influenced desires, often lead to violence, expulsion, where it's no longer about the objects of desire, but it's about displacing the other through the sacrifice, through the scapegoat mechanism. Now, the third part of the theory is that mimetic desire and the scapegoat mechanism are shown, revealed in the biblical narrative. Now, not only are those shown, but the way out of the scapegoat mechanism is shown in the biblical narrative, and we showed this through the story of Noah and the flood. So, Girard's hypothesis is that mimetic theory reveals to us, what it means to be human at a very fundamental level. So, our topic for today is great literature. Now, a good question to ask is, what makes literature great? Well, I would submit to you that there are many reasons that make literature, a piece of literature, great. But the most important reason is that great literature reveals to us who we are at a fundamental level. So, if René Girard is right, that mimetic theory reveals to us who we are at a fundamental level, then mimetic theory should be seen in great literature. So what I want to do today is go over Shakespeare's play, Julius Caesar. Now, Julius Caesar starts at a very chaotic time in the history of Rome. It's a time where the Roman Republic is turning into the Roman Empire. And what's happening here? Well, the senators within the Roman Republic are all vying for power, prestige, popularity. And they're influencing one another to desire power, prestige, and popularity more and more and more. And the person who has the most power, prestige, and popularity is a man named Julius Caesar, who's a great general, who the people of Rome love. He's very charismatic. And so Caesar is at the top. And there's a senator named Cassius, and Cassius envies Caesar. And part of the reason why he envies Caesar is that there are so many obstacles in him becoming who Julius Caesar is. He's not as popular as Julius Caesar. The people don't love him as much. He's not a great general. And so for Cassius, it's not about becoming emperor. It's about displacing Julius Caesar. And in order to do this, he has to turn other people against Julius Caesar. What we would call, he has to scapegoat Julius Caesar. And to do this, he needs to turn one of the most influential senators away from Caesar, Brutus. Now, Brutus happens to be a very good friend of Caesar. He admires Caesar. But Cassius, in an attempt to try to turn Brutus away from Caesar, says to Brutus, "Brutus, what's the difference between you and Caesar? There is none. You are both loved by the people. If you say the name Brutus, there's no difference in saying the name Caesar. You should be emperor. not Caesar. And this brings Brutus down the path of turning against Caesar, but it's not quite enough. He's loyal. Brutus is loyal to Caesar. So what Cassius ends up doing is appealing to Brutus's patriotism. Cassius says to Brutus, if Julius Caesar gains all of this power, it'll be the downfall of Rome, of the Roman people, of the Roman Republic. So if you love Rome, if you love the Republic, we must do away with Caesar. And this is what does it for Brutus. This is what turns Brutus away from Caesar, because he loves Rome. He's a great patriot. And he also remembers, and this is important, he also remembers how the Republic was formed. It was formed on an act of violence against the last king of Rome, Tarquin. It was at this point when Rome was under another chaotic time, and this act of expulsion of the king Tarquin brought peace and calm to Rome, and it also brought the Roman Republic. So Brutus, who knows his history well, he knows that this act of violence could bring peace back to Rome, so he does this act of violence. He participates in the death of Caesar for the good of Rome. At least he convinces himself that it's for the good of Rome. Now, before they end up killing Caesar, Brutus says to Cassius, we must do this as sacrificers and not butchers. And so Brutus knows that this act of violence has to be done in a certain way that won't turn the people against the mob that kills Caesar. But what ends up happening is after they kill Caesar, there's relative peace, there's brief peace, but it quickly leads to more violence. It leads to the people turning against the mob, and it leads to actually the mob turning against the mob. It leads to civil war. So Shakespeare is telling us here, I think, that whether we call our violence sacrificial or good, whether we call our violence, whether we call ourselves butchers or our violence is bad, really doesn't matter. Because what we will end up doing whenever we use violence is killing someone who's innocent. Julius Caesar was innocent. He didn't deserve this death. Now, the other thing that I think Shakespeare is warning us of is that it's easy for us to see that Brutus and Cassius are the bad people, and Julius Caesar is the good guy. But Shakespeare's warning us against this mentality. Because if you remember, Brutus and Cassius have done this murder, have performed this act of butchering for the good of Rome. They've convinced themselves that they are doing this for the good of Rome, that they are the good people, and that they are sacrificing for the good of Rome. And this is the trap that Shakespeare is warning us against. Because how many times do we convince ourselves that we are doing an act of goodness, an act of something good for others, when it involves violence? So, do we see mimetic theory within great literature, within the literature of Julius Caesar? I'll leave that up for you to decide. I'd like to hear your comments. Our next class, we're going to discuss on a personal level how this works out in our lives. I hope you'll join me. Bye-bye.